Alright guys, so I'm gonna try my first tutorial video on these Lowland swim briefs. They're pretty cute. You're gonna first take the pocket binding piece and put it right sides together with the slanted part of the pocket. Then you'll be sewing that on. It is supposed to be shorter than the slant. You're gonna be stretching it to fit as you sew. Then I'll kind of try to show you how I do the binding part. First, you're going to be folding the edge of the binding up against the seam that you just sewed. And the seam will be facing you. You can kind of see that there until my arm got in the way. Then you'll be folding the part that you just folded or ironed down and covering the seam with it. I like to make it where it's just barely covering it and not much is overhanging, because otherwise there won't be much binding on the right side of the fabric. So then you need to get ready to top stitch the binding down. There are different ways to do this. You can use a cover stitch or any stretch stitch on a sewing machine, like a zigzag stitch or a twin needle on a sewing machine. I was actually kind of struggling figuring out the tension here on my cover stitch at first because I haven't sewn swim on it yet, and I did eventually find out it was just my cover stitch didn't like stretch thread in the looper, so whatever. Anyways, then you're gonna put those pieces right side down and lay the pocket pieces right side down onto the wrong side of those front short pieces, if that makes sense. So it should look like this. Now you'll be prepping to sew those pocket pieces on. I love using glue sticks to base things down, so that's what I'm doing here. It's a washable glue stick, so it will come out. I will end up top stitching from the right side of the fabric because I was using stretch thread in a looper, and I felt like that would look kind of funny on the right side of the fabric because it's real like fluffy and sticks out a lot. And you'll see here in a little bit, there's a clip of what I thought was a good idea at the time where I, here we go, where I am just like feeling along with my fingers to find the edge of the pocket and drawing with a friction fabric pin where the edge is. I mean, it did work, but it would be a lot easier just to trace the piece before you glue it down. Then this is just me top stitching those pocket pieces down. One thing I will say is that I kind of feel like anyone who's used a cover stitch knows this, but you really should err on the side of catching too much fabric in the seam, in the cover stitch seam, rather than not enough. So I wish I would have even gone more to the right of that line I drew here, if that makes sense, because I actually missed a little piece of the fabric, of the pocket piece, but I'm not selling this. I didn't care enough to redo it, but yeah, it's frustrating when that happens. This is me ironing out that friction pin. I'm one of those people that will avoid ironing at all costs typically when I'm sewing, which is why I like knits, but that little mini Cricut iron is very handy. Now you're going to be putting the front and back short pieces together, right sides together like this, and you'll be sewing along the little crotch area and then on the side seams. Now this is me sewing that little crotch area, leg area, whatever you want to call it. I like to put the short tab in first because it's easier to catch it that way, and then you just guide the rest of it in. You really don't have to use tweezers or forceps like I did, but that's one of my other favorite sewing tools, to be honest, is like a pair of grippy tweezers. Okay, so now you'll be flipping one of those sides right side out and keeping the other wrong side out, and you'll be sliding the one that is right side out into the other. You'll have to watch that so that makes sense. Then you'll find that there's this U-shape area. Once you've matched them up, that's what you're going to be sewing next. So I like to pin, where the seams are, and then at the end of it, and just work it through your machine. You might hear my daughter in the background now as I do this voiceover, and you'll see my little son sitting on my lap there. It's just mom life, Okay, so next up, you'll want to prepare the waistband for buttonholes if you're going to be doing that, which I do recommend using a drawstring on this pattern, but anyways, if you're using directional fabric like I am, you're going to want to make sure that you're putting the holes on the right side of the band. Because like for this, if I would have turned this piece around and done it on the other side, then those waves would have been upside down, if you get what I'm saying. So for me, it helps to just go ahead and fold it so I can determine which one's the right side to actually make the holes on. Then once you have that figured out, you know where you're going to put your interfacing. I have seen people that just stick on like painter's tape temporarily, or they'll just put like some type of stabilizer underneath the fabric as it's going through the machine making buttonholes, or even tissue paper. And you totally could do that, but I prefer the stabilizer because, first of all, it won't move when it's under the machine, so that's nice. And secondly, like, this part of the fabric is going to be having drawstring, frequently going in and out of it, I guess, so you want it to be extra strong. Now, even though I don't like ironing, this is a part where it's kind of worth it for me for this type of pattern, because it's going to help a lot to have that memory crease where the center is once you're adding in the elastic later on. So you will see what I'm talking about here in a little bit. Next up, I'll just be showing you a clip of me sewing on the buttonholes. Each machine may be a little bit different in how exactly it does it, but one thing to know is that typically the machine will start at the bottom of the buttonhole, so that's, you want to make sure that you're putting the fabric in to where it lines up with the bottom of the line you're wanting, not necessarily the top, or else it'll just start going off the fabric, if that makes sense. Okay, so then you will be folding the waistband in half long ways like this and sewing along the raw edges like you typically would for a waistband. Then it looks like I didn't film myself doing this, but you're going to want to go ahead and sew your elastic piece together. So I like to use a wide, short zigzag stitch for that. Then you'll have these two pieces, the waistband and the elastic. You're going to quarter both and then slip the elastic into the waistband, which you'll see me doing here. Quartering like this just really helps to avoid random bunching in one area and then not enough bunching in the next. It makes everything more even. My daughter apparently had something to tell you too in that last voice clip. Sorry about that. Alright, so now make sure that the shorts are wrong side out, and you'll be pinning the waistband with elastic, to the front, back, side seams. I usually like to have the side seams facing backwards because I just think it ends up looking better that way. And then just make sure that if you did the buttonholes, that they are centered with the front shorts seam, if that makes sense, because otherwise it'll be kind of obvious that it's, offset there. Then you'll bring that over to the serger and serge the waistband on. You want to make sure you're catching all the layers, because there should be 4 layers here with the shorts, the 2 sides of the waistband, and the elastic. Anytime I have a bunch of layers like that, I again like to use these forceps just because it helps to make sure everything is, lined up right up against the blade. With this pattern, you don't really have to stretch the waistband to fit a lot. It more seems like it kind of is the same width as the shorts, but you'll do a little bit of stretching. Typically, if I am going to be stretching a lot to either fit on like a cuff or a waistband, then I turn my differential up, sometimes all the way up to 2. But you may not need to do it all the way up to 2 for this pattern, so just keep that in mind. Then make sure you secure the serger tail however you like. I like to use this nitpicker thing. I think that's the weirdest name ever, but yep. Next up, it's kind of optional, but you can top stitch the waistband seam down. I do think it gives it a nice professional touch, and I just want to get my money's worth out of this cover stitch. So I try to top stitch more things than I used to. But anyways, you can definitely still use a stretch stitch on your sewing machine for this too, like the good old zigzag or a twin needle, whatever floats your boat, or you cannot do it at all and it will still look fine, honestly. Next, I did go ahead and thread the drawstring into the, waistband. I just use a bodkin for that, but whatever suits your fancy and works is fine. I didn't video it because it's pretty straightforward, but after that, or before that, whatever sequence you want to do it in, you'll need to hem the bottom of the shorts. Then you'll be this is one of those times where ironing really would make it kind of easier for you in the long run, and it would probably look better, but it's also one of those times where I'm usually too lazy to iron. So I typically just measure at the seams, I measure the hem allowance, and then kind of fold the rest and hope it's close enough. But I will occasionally measure in a couple more spots and add more clips like you're seeing there. It's just one of those things, personal preference.
Yeah,
Now you'll just pin with whatever type of stretch stitch you like to use. I typically like to kind of start near a seam because, you know, you're going to have to overlap the stitching and it doesn't always look perfect. So it's better to have that not front and center, you know, on the front of the shorts, but that's also personal preference. Now, if you are using a cover stitch, then there's typically a certain way to release the threads. You'll see I'm pulling them out in front, snipping them, and then you pull the fabric behind. And then you'll cut the looper thread. I like to give the looper thread a little tug because it helps to form a knot. But anyways, then you're done. And you have the cutest little swim briefs ever. I think it's cute how they're so short and snug fitting. Really shows off those baby thighs. This might be too obvious to even tell you guys, but if you're not sure where to put the fabric to catch it in the hem allowance, then you could always take a little ruler and line it up with the left needle and figure out how far out you would put the fabric to match it up to like 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and then, you know, you get it. And then ta-da, they're done. And I think they fit so cute. They're like definitely on the shorter side, but that's adorable for a baby.